When Prince Harry released his explosive memoir Spare in January 2023, it sent shockwaves not only through the British public but deep into the heart of the royal family itself. Among the most painful revelations for King Charles III were Harry's biting remarks about Queen Camilla, the woman his father had loved for decades, through scandal, divorce, and tragedy. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. According to royal insiders, the king was devastated by what he saw as an ultimate act of disrespect. In the monarch's eyes, his youngest son had not merely aired private grievances, he had crossed a sacred line that could never be uncrossed. Camilla, long a source of tension and sensitivity, had become the focal point of a wound too deep to ignore. Sources close to Buckingham Palace told the Mirror that the king's reaction was swift and decisive. In what many believe was a symbolic gesture of finality, Charles ordered the eviction of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle from Frogmore Cottage, their official residence on the Windsor estate. The timing was no coincidence. The decision came soon after Spare hit the shelves and dominated headlines across the world. Harry's book, while offering a raw glimpse into his personal struggles and strained family relationships, also painted Queen Camilla in a deeply unflattering light. He referred to her repeatedly as the other woman and the wicked stepmother, mentioning her more than 60 times throughout the memoir. Those close to the monarch say that every one of those words landed like a blow. A royal insider described the king's private fury and heartbreak in detail. It was the last straw. Harry knew, without a doubt, that Camilla was a red line for his father. He crossed it anyway, with complete disregard. The king felt utterly betrayed. He believed this was the ultimate act of disrespect. Behind palace walls, the fallout from Spare was said to be monumental. It was not just the hurtful remarks about Camilla that stung. The book's contents opened what one insider described as a Pandora's box of grievances, accusations, and family secrets. Harry's honesty, though lauded by some readers as brave and cathartic, left lasting damage within his family, particularly between him, his father, and his brother, Prince William. Among Harry's most controversial claims was one that took aim directly at William, revealing what he called a bare-faced lie surrounding the Prince of Wales's 2011 wedding to Kate Middleton. In the memoir, Harry stated that although he was publicly named as William's best man, it was all an elaborate deception meant to protect the privacy of William's two close friends, James Mead and Thomas Van Straubenzee, who were the true best men and delivered the traditional speeches. Harry wrote that his own role had been limited to a public appearance, a symbolic gesture to satisfy media expectations. For many royal watchers, this revelation painted a picture of deep mistrust and manipulation within the firm. What had once been portrayed as a close and supportive brotherhood now appeared fractured, layered with resentment, secrecy, and control. Meanwhile, King Charles, already facing the challenge of uniting a modern monarchy in the post-Elizabethan era, was left grappling with a painful reality. His youngest son's words had pierced the family's most sensitive fault line. Insiders say he withdrew emotionally in the aftermath, struggling to reconcile his role as monarch with that of a father wounded by betrayal. Though royal aides have publicly maintained silence on the matter, sources suggest that the damage caused by Spare may be irreparable. The king has always believed in forgiveness, one palace insider shared, but this was different. It wasn't just about family. It was about respect, legacy, and loyalty to the institution. And for Charles, Camilla is at the heart of that. As the monarchy attempts to move forward, the rift between father and son remains one of the most painful chapters in recent royal history, a reminder that even among crowns and castles, the deepest scars are often those left by family. The bond between Prince William and Prince Harry was once the emotional core of the modern monarchy, the unbreakable link forged in the crucible of tragedy. As young boys, they walked behind their mother Princess Diana's coffin, the eyes of the world upon them, their grief silent but shared. They were brothers bound by pain, shaped by loss, and united by the promise that they would face the future together. Yet, in the years that followed, the promise began to crumble, and by the time Spare was published, that brotherhood had been reduced to cold formality and wounded silence. In the pages of his memoir, Harry did not hold back when speaking about his older brother. He laid bare years of rivalry, misunderstanding, and suppressed anger. What emerged was a portrait of two men whose destinies were shaped by birth order and burdened by expectation. William, the heir, groomed from childhood to inherit the crown, and Harry, the spare, forever searching for purpose in the shadow of the throne. Their differences, once manageable, became amplified by circumstance and fueled by resentment. Harry's revelation about William's wedding to Kate Middleton was among the most striking examples of this deep divide. For years, the world believed Harry had stood proudly as his brother's best man, a role symbolizing brotherly love and solidarity. But Harry claimed that the truth was far less noble. In Spare, he wrote that the palace orchestrated a charade, naming him best man only to deflect attention from William's real best men, his two close friends, James Mead and Thomas Van Straubenzee. According to Harry, even the traditional best man's speech, an honored royal custom, had been denied to him. Instead, he was merely asked to introduce the true best men. Behind the smiles and polished photographs, there was humiliation and heartache. For Harry, it was yet another reminder that appearances mattered more than truth within the royal family. The revelation shocked readers, but, to those within the palace, it was only one of many signs that the brothers' relationship had deteriorated beyond repair. Sources close to both princes revealed that tension between them had been simmering long before Meghan Markle entered the picture. Harry's sense of alienation had deep roots, a lifetime of being treated differently, of having his position defined not by his abilities or his heart but by a single fact of birth. He often felt like the backup, the insurance policy, the one who mattered only until William had children of his own. When Meghan came into Harry's life, she brought joy but also disruption. Harry found in her a partner who saw him as more than just the spare, while William reportedly viewed her with suspicion. Their relationship soon became a battlefield upon which old wounds reopened. The brothers clashed over everything, from royal protocol to press coverage, from loyalty to the family to loyalty to one another. In one explosive argument, Harry alleged that William had physically attacked him during a heated confrontation about Meghan. Though Buckingham Palace never confirmed or denied the claim, it added fuel to an already raging fire. By the time Spare was released, what had once been brotherly competition had turned into estrangement. Harry's unflinching account of their private conversations, family gatherings, and royal tensions painted William as cold, controlling, and deeply loyal to the system that Harry had chosen to abandon. To some, Harry's honesty felt courageous, a necessary breaking of silence. To others, it was an unforgivable betrayal, a public airing of private pain that the monarchy would never be able to fully recover from. William, for his part, reportedly felt blindsided and humiliated. Friends close to him told the press that the Prince of Wales was incandescent with rage over how Harry had portrayed not only him but his wife, Kate. In Spare, Harry described Kate and William as reserved and judgmental toward Meghan, claiming that they made little effort to welcome her into the royal fold. For William, the accusation cut deep, especially because he had always seen himself as his brother's protector. That image was now shattered, replaced by one of bitterness and estrangement. King Charles, caught between his two sons, struggled to hold his fractured family together. He urged reconciliation in private, hoping time and distance might soften the tension. But insiders say that the king's attempts were futile, the trust between William and Harry had been obliterated. Harry's decision to reveal intimate details about their lives, conversations, and conflicts left William unable to forgive. He feels Harry has betrayed the family and their mother's memory, one palace aide revealed. There's no going back after this. The brothers' relationship became symbolic of the monarchy's internal struggle, the battle between tradition and change, duty and freedom, silence and truth. William embodied the crown, the institution, the enduring legacy of the monarchy. Harry represented rebellion, emotion, and the yearning to be seen as human before royal. Once, they had balanced each other perfectly. Now, they stood on opposite sides of a chasm too wide to bridge. In the months after Spare's release, the brothers' paths diverged completely. William focused on preparing for his future role as king alongside Kate, taking on more public duties, appearing calm and resolute despite the turmoil behind palace doors. Harry, meanwhile, remained in California, raising his family and building his life away from royal constraints. Yet, no matter how far apart they lived, the ghost of their fractured bond lingered in every public appearance, every royal event, every unanswered question. The world continued to watch, hoping for reconciliation, but even the most optimistic observers saw little chance of healing. For every olive branch offered, there was a new wound opened by another revelation, another interview, another subtle remark that reignited old pain. The once inseparable brothers, who had faced the unimaginable together as children, now barely spoke. As insiders quietly admit, the monarchy has weathered scandals, divorces, and betrayals before, but few wounds have cut this deep. The divide between William and Harry is not just personal, it represents a generational shift in what it means to be royal in the modern world. One brother clings to duty, the other to freedom. And somewhere between them lies the broken legacy of the woman who once held them together, Princess Diana. For King Charles, watching his sons drift further apart is perhaps the cruelest legacy of all. The future of the monarchy may be secure, but the family at its core remains fractured, its foundation weakened by mistrust and grief. What was once a story of brotherhood has become one of silence and sorrow, with two princes standing on opposite ends of a kingdom, unable, or unwilling, to cross the divide. Inside the grand and echoing halls of Buckingham Palace, where portraits of monarchs past seem to whisper lessons of restraint and duty, King Charles III wrestled with a torment that no crown could ease. Behind the regal composure and the carefully choreographed public appearances lay a man caught between two irreconcilable worlds, the role of a sovereign who must protect the image of the monarchy and the role of a father who has watched his sons drift into a bitter cold war of words and emotions. Since the release of Spare, those close to the king described him as a man haunted by regret and torn by love. Charles had endured decades of public scrutiny, scandal, and vilification, but nothing had wounded him as deeply as the rift between his two sons. Every photograph of the brothers standing apart at official events, every article recounting their feud, was a dagger to his heart. For years, he had hoped that time and distance would heal old wounds, that the shared grief of losing their mother would keep William and Harry bound to one another. Instead, Spare had exposed just how fractured the family had become. Privately, Charles often confided in close aides about his anguish. He was said to have spent long, solitary evenings at Highgrove, walking through the gardens that once brought him peace, now reflecting on where things had gone wrong. Some within his circle said he blamed himself, not for his actions as a father, but for being too consumed by duty to notice how deeply Harry had felt unseen. Others said his resentment toward Harry's public attacks ran just as deep as his sadness. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and helpless all at once. The Queen, Camilla, stood by his side, offering calm counsel and quiet reassurance, yet even she could not lift the shadow that hung over the king. In Harry's memoir, she had been painted as the manipulative, other woman, the so-called villain of his parents' marriage. Those words had reopened wounds that had taken years to heal in the public eye. For Camilla, it was deeply painful to be once again at the center of controversy she thought had long been buried. For Charles, it was unbearable to see his wife attacked by his own son. Sources close to the royal household revealed that when Charles learned of the harsh passages in Spare, he was momentarily speechless. The old guilt that had followed him since Diana's death resurfaced. To him, Harry's accusations were not only cruel but unfair, a rewriting of history that ignored the years of effort he had spent trying to bring stability and compassion into his sons' lives after their mother's passing. Those around him said that while his face betrayed little, his eyes carried the pain of a father who had lost something more precious than public approval, his family's unity. The eviction of Harry and Meghan from Frogmore Cottage, though seen by the public as an act of retaliation, was, insiders claim, more symbolic than spiteful. It was Charles's way of drawing a boundary, of asserting that his family's loyalty and respect must have limits. He had been patient, forgiving even, but Spare had crossed a threshold that could not be ignored. The decision was not just about property, it was about consequence. Yet privately, it broke him to do it. He knew that evicting his youngest son from the home that had once been his sanctuary would only deepen the divide. But as king, he could not afford to appear weak in the face of defiance. Despite his hurt, Charles continued to hold out hope for reconciliation. In quiet moments, he often expressed his desire to one day sit down with both of his sons, not as monarch and heirs, but as a father and his boys, and talk through the pain. However, each attempt at mediation was thwarted by pride, protocol, and the invisible weight of the crown. William, steadfast and unyielding, believed that any reconciliation must come with an apology from Harry for the public humiliation he had caused. Harry, on the other hand, insisted that he had nothing to apologize for, claiming he had simply told his truth. Between those two opposing forces, Charles found himself isolated, the peacekeeper with no peace left to give. Camilla, 2. Tried to help her husband navigate the storm. She reminded him gently that the monarchy had survived worse wars, divorces, scandals, and that time would soften the wounds. Yet she also reminded him that he had a duty to protect the institution above all else. You must think of the crown, she reportedly told him. The family will follow when it can. It was advice born not of coldness but of realism, and though Charles nodded, her words only deepened the ache in his chest. He had waited his entire life to become king, but now that he wore the crown, he found it came at the cost of the one thing he valued most, his son's love. As weeks turned to months, the situation showed no signs of healing. Harry's distance from the family grew, and communication with his father became rare, often reduced to short, polite exchanges through aides or text messages. The king made discreet efforts to reach out, birthday calls, handwritten notes, small gestures of goodwill, but the silence that followed was louder than any argument. He often confided to his staff that the greatest tragedy of his reign was not political instability or public opinion but the emptiness at his own family's dinner table. Even during official events, when the cameras were flashing and the world watched him smile and wave, those close to him noticed a heaviness in his demeanor. The burden of the crown, they said, had never felt heavier. For Charles, the image of his sons as young boys, laughing, chasing each other through the gardens of Highgrove, united in their shared loss of their mother, haunted him. That memory had become both his comfort and his torment, a reminder of how much had changed, and how much he wished he could change back. In private, Charles's health had also begun to falter under the strain. The long days, the emotional toll, and the constant scrutiny took their toll on the 75-year-old king. Those closest to him urged him to rest, but he found it difficult to detach from his thoughts. He would sit in his study late into the night, staring at old family photographs, Diana holding the boys in her arms, William's wedding day, the first picture of Harry and Meghan with baby Archie. Each photograph told a story of love, loss, and a family that once seemed invincible. To the public, Charles was every bit the dignified monarch his mother had raised him to be, calm, measured, always composed. But behind closed doors, he was a man burdened by heartbreak, struggling to reconcile the world's expectations with his own aching humanity. He knew that as king, he must stand above the drama, preserve the dignity of the crown, and protect the monarchy for generations to come. But as a father, he could not help yearning for the simplest of things, for his sons to look at each other not as rivals or enemies, but as brothers again. In the end, it was a lonely kind of power. The crown had given Charles everything he had ever been trained to desire, but it had taken from him the one thing he could never replace, peace within his family. And as he walked through the silent corridors of his palace, the weight of history pressing down upon him, the King of the United Kingdom carried not just the burden of the realm, but the heartbreak of a father whose family, despite all the grandeur of monarchy, had fallen apart before his eyes. Behind the regal smile and the polished poise of Queen Camilla lies a woman who has weathered storms fiercer than most could ever imagine. For decades, she had endured being the villain in the eyes of the public, branded the homewrecker, the other woman, the shadow that darkened the fairy tale of Prince Charles and Princess Diana. She had spent years rebuilding her image, softening her edges, and quietly proving herself as the steadfast partner who brought balance to a complicated man. But when Spare was released, all the ghosts she thought she had buried came storming back to life. The book reopened wounds that time, duty, and grace had only just begun to heal. Harry's words about her, calling her, the other woman, dangerous, and a wicked stepmother, cut deeper than any tabloid headline ever had. These were not the barbs of strangers, they were accusations from the boy she had once watched grow up, the boy she had hoped would one day see her not as an enemy, but as family. For Camilla, the pain was both private and profound. She knew she would have to endure it quietly, for the queen could never appear wounded. But those close to her noticed the sadness behind her composed smile, the flicker of hurt in her eyes when Harry's name was mentioned. Inside Clarence's house, the tension was palpable in the days following the book's release. Charles was furious, wounded, and protective, not just as king, but as a husband who had spent decades trying to shield the woman he loved from public cruelty. Camilla, however, handled it differently. She didn't rant or break down. She did what she had always done, she endured. Let them talk, she reportedly told a friend. We've been through worse. But those who knew her well could see the toll it took. Her nights became restless, her appetite waned, and she often retreated to her reading room for long hours of silence. Camilla's relationship with Harry had always been fragile. From the beginning, she sensed his discomfort. After Diana's death, she knew her presence in his father's life would never be easy to accept. She had tried to bridge the gap through small gestures, handwritten notes, gentle conversation, kindness. But there was always a wall between them, an invisible boundary that neither could cross. Harry's resentment, though rarely expressed openly in the early years, lingered beneath the surface. To him, she would always be the woman who replaced his mother in his father's heart. To her, he was the child she could never fully reach. When Charles and Camilla married in 2005, she hoped time would soften the tension. And for a while, it seemed to. Harry and William both appeared cordial, attending the wedding with polite smiles and respectful distance. Camilla never expected affection from them, only acceptance. But the illusion of peace was fragile. As the years passed, and as Harry began to drift further from the royal fold, she could feel the quiet hostility returning. By the time Meghan Markle entered the picture, the royal dynamic had shifted dramatically. Camilla, once the outsider, had become part of the institution, while Meghan was stepping into the same hostile world Camilla had once fought to survive. But instead of unity, there was friction. Camilla, cautious and experienced, viewed Meghan with wary understanding, recognizing the same spark of independence and defiance that had once caused her own suffering. Yet the younger couple saw her as part of the old system, the machine